Mike and Renee Lemon from It Is Written Canada have set aside September 30th to October 7th as a special 8 days of prayer for youth and young adults all across Canada. They want to set aside this time that we can pray together for our young people. I remember a time many years ago when my mother prayed for me. I was 16 years old. I was going to a public school in Toronto, and my mother knew that my life had taken a turn away from the Lord. Monday, I was walking up the stairs to my apartment. We lived 6 stories up, and my heart was pounding. I actually thought to myself, at 16 years of age, I could have a heart attack right there. Well, that night, as I sat down to watch television after my supper, my mother got out her tape recorder, her cassette tape player, and started listening to a tape by Dr. Sang Lee, a health speaker. Well, as my mother sat there and listened to Sang Lee talk, I turned up the television. Then my mother turned up the volume on her cassette player, and I turned up the television. This went back and forth till we were both blaring our devices very loud, the television and her cassette player. My mom turned off the cassette player, and she went into her room. I instinctively knew that my mom was going into the bedroom to pray. My mom prayed that night for me. The next night, Tuesday night, the same thing happened. The war of the volumes happened again. I had my TV, my mom had her cassette player. And then she did the same thing, went into her room and prayed for me. Wednesday night, exactly the same thing happened. By Thursday night, we were at it again. Me turning up the volume, my mom turning up the volume. This time, she turned off the cassette player, left it there, and went into her room to pray for me. I had been listening to what she was listening to. Instead of watching the television, my ears were glued to the speaker that was speaking on cassette tape, talking about God and healthful living. I went over to where she was sitting. I pushed play on the cassette tape. And this health speaker, Dr. Sang Lee, was talking about people that if they wanted a change in life, to not be afraid to call out to God for help. That evening, while my mom was praying for me in the bedroom, I called out for help to God. And over the next few weeks, my life drastically changed. I started to realize the power of a parent's prayer for their children. A few years later, my mom and I were praying for my brother. My brother was a confirmed alcoholic, getting deeper and deeper into his addiction. And we started to pray. They said, Lord, you're going to have to do something to help my brother. My mom cried because it was for her son. I could see that fervent prayer that my mom would have for my brother, and I knew that she did the same thing for me. My brother was driving home drunk one night, Friday night in Toronto, went through a red light, T-boned another car, and sent the young lady to the hospital. It took her a whole year to walk again. My brother was sentenced to jail for 3 months back then. Today would be much longer. I looked up to God and said, God, what are you doing here? I want you to save my brother. And the Lord whispered back, he said, Paul, I'm doing that. Trust me. Well, when my brother went to jail, and he was there, he snored real loud, and I mean real loud. And as he was snoring away, there was a group of prisoners that came up to him the next morning and said, Rob, was that you snoring? He said, yeah, if you snore like that tonight, you're not going to be alive by the morning. My brother was paranoid because he knew that these men that came up and threatened him were telling the truth. The next night, he kept wide awake. He could do it, no problem at all. But the next night after that, he was struggling. And the third night after that, he was really struggling to keep awake. As he was struggling to keep awake, he knew there was only one thing he needed to do. He got down off his bed and onto his knees, and he said, Lord, I need help. Can you get me out of here? The next morning, one of the guards came to my brother and said, Rob, the warden wants to see you. He walked to the warden's office under the guard's supervision. He ushered into the warden's office, and the door was shut. The warden looked at my brother and said, Rob, you're an alcoholic, right? He goes, yes. I hear there's a death threat on your life. He goes, there is. He goes, Rob, I want to help you with your alcoholism. I will parole you today if you go see a friend of mine who's a counselor, and for the next 3 months, twice a week, you go talk to her about your addiction. And he said, if you do that and you don't miss a week, I will parole you. He says, if you don't take me seriously and you skip out on these meetings, you'll be back here for 6 months. And I guarantee you what those men threaten, they will carry out. My brother went to that counselor, and that counselor started telling him about the higher power of Jesus Christ, telling my brother he needed to turn his life over to him, and he would have victory over his alcoholism. The amazing thing is, my mom prayed for me, and I saw it work in my life. And my mom and myself prayed for my brother, and I watched my brother come back to the Lord. So today, as we look forward to this 8 days of prayer that Mike and Renee Lemon will be holding, I pray that you will bring your prayer requests to the Lord. There's one thing I hear when I go around to camp meetings and churches and different venues, and I talk all across Canada. Parents bring to me prayer requests for their children. Jesus has promised us that he will save our kids, and I would like us to use this time for a special prayer across Canada for our young people. God bless you as you pray. God bless It Is Written and Mike and Renee Lemon as they lead out in this special 8 days of prayer. And as we see answered prayers come true before our very eyes, as we lift up our children to Jesus, the only one who can save them. God bless you all.